and Mumbai was never the same. We have the book launch of The Siege, 68 Hours Inside the Taj Hotel. And we have with us here today authors Adrian Levy and Kathy Scott Clark. Thank you for being here with us today. We also have with us Barkha Dutt, who will be leading the discussion. A little bit about the authors before we start off. Adrian Levy worked as a foreign correspondent covering South Asia for the Sunday Times UK before moving to The Guardian in 2002, El Mundo in Spain, and Courier International in France. He's described his work as amongst the best of courageous European journalism. In 2004, he won the One World Award for Foreign Reporting, and in 2009 was made Press Journalist of the Year. He has also co-produced award-winning documentaries such as Kashmir's Torture Trail. His work includes The Stone of Heaven, The Amber Room, Deception, and the acclaimed book of 2012, The Meadow. With us is also Kathy Scott Clark, an award-winning journalist, filmmaker, and author of 4 books, including Deception, Pakistan, the United States, and the Global Nuclear Weapons Conspiracy, and The Meadow, Kashmir 1995, Where the Terror Began. In 2009, she won the One World Media Journalist of the Year award, and in 2013, her film Kashmir's Torture Trail won the Amnesty International Award for Best Documentary and was shortlisted for the Grierson Award and the Rory Peck Awards. Another of her films, Chinese Murder Mystery, an investigation into the death of Neil Haywood, was longlisted for a BAFTA and nominated for the Monte Carlo Television Awards 2013. Leading the discussion is Barkha Dutt, an Indian television journalist and columnist. She is currently the group editor with NDTV and has won many national and international awards, including the Padma Shri. She writes a column for the Hindustan Times called Third Eye. Ms. Dutt, may I request you to lead the discussion henceforth, please?
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think there is no dispute about one fact, whatever else we may or may not agree on when it comes to 26/11, the attacks on Mumbai, the attacks on India. And that is this, that for people of our generation, it is perhaps the strongest marker in the collective memory of this country, at least for the times that we live in. While our parents' generation may have remembered where they were in relation to the partition of India or a war they witnessed, I think most of us, if we were to look back over the last 15, 20 years, we measure that one moment in our collective imagination in relation to where we were and what we were doing when the news came that India, not just Mumbai, not just Bombay, but India, was under siege. And you would imagine that everything that was possible to say about 26/11 had been said, had been reported, had been written about. But what really emerges in this remarkable book by Adrian Levy and Kathy Scott Clark is that there is so much left to say and there is so much left to ask. And primary among them is the central question of this book. How is it that 10 men, 10 terrorists, one short of a cricket team, as the authors say, were able to lay an entire country to siege and hold it to ransom? Could the lives that were lost have been saved? And has anything since then changed? Have we even stepped out of the political correctness that seems to, in a sense, confine the debate around 26/11 to ask ourselves the hard questions that need to be asked? I know it's a very emotional subject, especially for those of you who belong to Mumbai, but I think for all of us as Indians, it's a wound that we actually are a little bit scared of picking at because it still hurts. It's still so raw. And maybe that's one of the reasons that some of the questions that need to be asked haven't been asked, and if they've been asked, they certainly haven't been answered. Thank you for this book, Adrian and Kathy, and I want to start by asking you, Adrian, the thing about the book that's really grabbed headlines and got everybody talking is the chilling thought that there was somebody inside the Indian security establishment who was actually helping the Pakistanis and I will say the word Pakistanis loosely because there is no consensus on whether these were non-state actors, these were state actors, these were non-state actors backed by a section of the security establishment. So I'll simply say the Pakistanis. And the chilling thing that comes out in this book is that there was somebody in the Indian security establishment who was a mole, who was a conduit. Your book calls this person Honeybee. You're not able to identify who Honeybee is. But I have to ask you, why are you so certain that he or she exists?
This is one of the most difficult questions to answer in connection with the book. But all we can do is present the evidence as we come across it. And when the investigators in Pakistan got to finally raid the barrack-like structures where the Fidain squad had been based in Karachi, there were 2 centres there, 1 control room, and then they also raided in Muzaffarabad the Lashkar training camp and a second training camp that was in Lahore. Materials were recovered from those camps, and those materials were military training manuals, particularly, which contained counter-hostage situation photographs and writings, which would have helped in the training of counter-hostage squads. The kind of material used, for example, by Black Hats, by NSG. And that material would be helpful for room clearance, for close quarter fighting, for top-to-bottom room clearance. And what became significant was once that material had come to light, and you know that Lashkar was using that to train, and the material purportedly, according to investigators, came from India, members of the NSG made an interesting comment. When they were in the hardest, knottiest bit of the fight inside the palace wing of the Taj Hotel, and they were trying to rout the gunmen from the 4th, the 5th floors of the hotel, there was a particular set piece that took place involving room clearance, and the tactics that met them were their own tactics.
So you're saying that as the NSG is trying to take out these terrorists, they're actually confronted with the same operational tactics that they have been trained in.
Exactly right, and it's exactly the same kind of tactics that were found in the manuals that purported to be from India. Now, the ISI describe the conduit for these manuals and the information as Honeybee, not us. They gave the name Honeybee. Now,
where did you stumble upon this name? I just want to push you on this point a little more because it's one of the most contentious points made in this book. So when you say the ISI dubbed this mole the Honeybee, do you mean the ISI, the agency? Do you mean the ISI loosely? Do you mean sections of the ISI? Who dubbed this mole the Honeybee?
The mole was dubbed Honeybee by sections of the ISI, the officers who were responsible for training Headley, the officers who were liaising with the jihad factory in Pakistan. Now, whether that is the institution of the ISI becomes much more contentious, as Kathy will tell you.
I think I'm not switched on.
Is that on? Yeah.
I think it's important to focus on Major Iqbal, who was the ISI handler of David Headley in Lahore, and he was the focus, and he would have been running the agent over here. Everything was going through him as far as official ISI practices were concerned. And I think it's also important to say that our material came from the FIA, the Federal Investigation Agency in Pakistan, who confirmed this information about the agent over here. So I think Major Iqbal is also a very important figure in Lahore. I think if you look at the level to which...
Just hold it a little closer. Just hold your mic a little closer.
The level to which he was running the preparation for the operation here. I mean, he funded £25,000 for David Headley to set up his fake immigration shop in Tardeo Market. And also when David Headley, whenever he came back from Mumbai with his memory sticks filled and his cameras and his video footage, he always went first to Major Iqbal. And Major Iqbal was also getting information from other sources over here.
Now, can I just say one other thing?
Yeah.
I mean, 2 things struck me about the debate about Honeybee. The first thing is that this is an attack from Pakistan against India. And that is the most important headline, if you like. Now, within that, ISI exists over here. They operate, as we know, through various conduits, and RAW exists over there. And there is this organic free flow across the hot border between the 2 nations. Now, identifying what the conduit is a separate issue. We've never been able to take it beyond the surmise of the civilian investigators in Pakistan, which was also backed up by Gulf intelligence that warned India of a leak.
But a number of Indians, among them me, would argue that when you say that there is this free flow of agents, as it were, across the border, obviously when it comes to spies, nobody's going to acknowledge it, but every country has spies in each other's countries. But the difference when it comes to honeybee and a mole in the Indian security establishment is that this is actually an act of war against India. And the Indians would argue, not just the Indian government, but Indians sitting here would argue that India does not have a policy of terrorism or terrorist groups as strategic assets to be used against Pakistan. And therefore, for us to identify who honeybee is becomes critical. Now, a question here. Ram Pradhan, former Home Secretary and the head of an administrative inquiry committee, has endorsed the fact that there was indeed a mole.
I read it, yeah.
And that he alerted the then Home Minister, Mr. P. Chidambaram, about it. Why do you believe, and I'm asking you this because you must have spoken to a number of people trying to ascertain the identity of honeybee, why do you believe we do not know who this mole is? Is it because it's highly classified? Is it because it's so low level that it's difficult to identify? How junior could the mole be if classified manuals were able to be sent across the border?
The first thing to say is I believe that there was knowledge at cabinet level that there was a mole. I know
knowledge at cabinet level?
Yeah, that there
at
was
what
a mole.
stage? During the attacks?
No, after the attacks. And that was known in 2009 at cabinet level. But whether or not the information was specific enough, or whether or not they identified a conduit, which is the word that we kept coming back to, a method of transportation for this material, that we're not clear on. But I've noticed that there's a call for an inquiry. So, you know, what kind of inquiry will this be? My fear is that, like all the others, it will be a closed-door affair, and we'll know none of the results.
Kathy, one of the things that Ram Pradhan says is that one of the moles, in a sense, or one of the conduits, was David Headley himself. That he was both a kind of strategic planner, if you will, of these attacks, a supplier of information, and certainly a conduit who was a kind of go-between. Now, Headley, I want both of you to talk a little bit about David Headley. It's like the complete story around Headley will never actually be known. And I say this because Indians are looking with great interest and some skepticism at the fact that he's, for example, escaped the death sentence in the United States of America. And the chapter on Prince David that both of you have written, it's absolutely fascinating. And one of the things that takes place is how David Headley's wife, Faiza, one of his wives, goes to the American embassy in Pakistan and shares all the information that she has about his suspicious activities, his many trips to Mumbai, and so on. And they kind of hush it away as a domestic quarrel. And later he confronts her and says, why did you go to the American embassy? And she's thinking, how did he know that she was there? And she says, either he's a terrorist or he's working for the Americans. Now, I have to ask you, which one do you think he was? Or was he both?
He was both. And you said at the beginning, no one really understands who David Headley is. And I'm sure even if he was sitting here today on that couch there, we wouldn't have a better idea because he's a complete actor. He can act as a Westerner, an American traveller in the Taj in Mumbai, quaffing champagne, getting on with everybody, making friends. He can be just as easy on the streets of Lahore as a fair-skinned Urdu-speaking Pakistani with a very interesting background and a very illustrious family history. I think he worked only for himself, ever. He loved to be at the centre of attention. He thinks of himself as a James Bond figure. He enjoyed the attention. He enjoyed being at the centre of a conspiracy, the intrigue, the excitement.
Are you saying he was more a narcissist and less an ideologue?
Absolutely, a sociopath. We described him as a sociopath. His mother, there's a fantastic quote that came from the family, and she was describing her hybrid son. I mean, for those of you who don't know, his mother comes from a family from Maryland, and she is an heiress, an adventuress, and the family had funded the research of Albert Einstein. And then you've got the father, who was this wonderful broadcaster and writer, much revered and loved in Pakistan. And the son is neither one thing nor the other in the middle. And he was this kind of hybrid who was neither one thing or another. And she says about her own son that he was so lacking in a sense of self that he was ultimately selfish. And I think that's the best description of him. He had no real defined sense of who he was, what he needed, other than satisfying himself. All his relationships are disastrous. The women he's with, he beats them, gets into trouble for battery, domestic abuse.
But he's also never honest
He's never
with any of them.
straightforward. Yeah.
But when you look at the common description of David Headley here, most commonly he's been described as a double agent.
Yeah. Okay.
When you say double agent, it's hard to tell who he turned on. And I ask this because obviously he starts as somebody who's working for the Americans. He gets into Pakistan still working for the Americans. He infiltrates the Lashkar-e-Taiba. And then what happens? Here's where the story is incomplete because, I mean, you chronicle some of it. But what happens to him after that? How does the Lashkar's Operation Bombay project interest him? How does it hook him?
Well, the Hall of Mirrors begins here because what we now know is that after a while, once he penetrated Lashkar, Lashkar itself believed that he was a spy. And they reported this back to the ISI, and the ISI had their own concerns and stopped meeting him personally. And they set up the telephony system that would subsequently be used to attack Mumbai, which was this Skype-like internet telephone with a leased line from New Jersey. The initial stages of that were used then to distance Headley, and Headley was only talked to via Skype as the agents themselves became insecure about his role.
So you're saying the ISI itself, and this is how your chapter actually ends on Prince David, the ISI itself becomes suspicious of whether Headley's with them or with the Americans?
Yes.
In the latter months, I mean, in the
Yes.
last few months before Mumbai happened, he was completely out of the loop. He wasn't in on any of the meetings. He didn't find out where the training was going on, the nature of the recruitment, who was actually going to be sent over, how it was going to work. I mean, we say at one point that the first thing he knew that it was actually happening, the operation was happening, was when his Lashkar handler rang him up and said, "Turn on your TV." And then he was in Lahore at that stage with his third wife, Faiza. And then his second wife, Shazia, who had gone to Chicago, she sent him a text as well and said, "Congratulations on your graduation."
But there is actually more evidence as well that goes right up to the raid itself and to the days beyond, because the American intelligence community was gathering emails and phone intercepts and text message capture on David Headley. And that information showed that he'd left the orbit of Lashkar-e-Taiba and moved towards Al-Qaeda. And he, along with another group of people within Lashkar who were disaffected with the state, broadly speaking, after the Lal Masjid operation, wanted to be in with Ilyas Kashmiri in the tribal territories. They wanted to be nearer to Osama. Now, the chance to have an American passport holder who can be near invisible in Pakistan, who at that time is the only American passport holder, who is being affiliated with Al-Qaeda, that is too much of an opportunity for the Americans to dismiss.
But the question that then arises and never really been asked in so many words is, did the American security establishment or did the American intelligence establishment know about David Headley's suspicious activities, his many trips to Mumbai? Because his wife, Faiza, does alert the American embassy in Pakistan. In which case, why do the Americans do nothing to stop this? Why do they look at this as a routine domestic quarrel between a husband and a wife? What did the Americans know and what did they not know about Headley?
I think they knew pretty much everything, as Adrian said, that they had a different game playing. He was the white-skinned American who could get them close to the search for Osama bin Laden. This is in 2007, 2008, so long before he was actually killed in Abbottabad. And Headley's claims that things are being planned for Mumbai are passed back to the Indian authorities, the Indian intelligence agencies, by the Americans. So they are being informed by David. He's got three handlers, effectively. He's got Major Iqbal from the ISI in Lahore. He goes to see him first as soon as he gets off the plane. Then he goes on the bus or in a car up to Muzaffarabad to see his handler from Lashkar, and then he goes back to Washington or to Chicago, and he meets his handler from the CIA or the DEA over there, and he's briefing them all. And I truly believe that when he's in each of those separate situations, he believes he's working only for those people. He can completely compartmentalise those different aspects of his life.
And those intelligence bulletins that America and other Western agencies pass to IB, or to RAW, and then to IB, and then down to the level of the police, are digested from David Headley's intelligence.
I was just going to ask you that. Are you saying that the American intelligence establishment, or whoever was handling Headley, knew that there was a possible attack on Mumbai?
Yes. They were very precise. And if you look at the build-up of the messages and the content, it's very precise. Mumbai is identified as the target in 2006. Lashkar is identified as the mastermind in 2006.
The Taj is identified as one of the specific targets in 2006.
The Oberoi, CST, a Jewish community centre, not naming the one specifically, and potentially a hospital, which would turn out to be Kama, as we know from the attack there. But then it built up. More warnings come in. It would be a marine landing, a headline warning, because this is a new method of attacking India. Marine landing, Fedayeen squad, same methodology as Kashmir in the valley. And then after that, weaponry, explosives. And one of them says a dozen men, not 10.
In other words, the CIA knew that Mumbai was going to be attacked, or the FBI knew that Mumbai was going to be attacked, tried to pass on this alert not once but several times to their Indian counterparts, and thought that that was the most they could do while Headley continued to remain in their minds their informant, their person in the Lashkar.
But can I just say one thing? It's very easy in hindsight to say it's that straightforward, but I think we have to also consider the fact there are thousands of other warnings about different attacks in different locations, which are all going across the desks of people in New York and people in New Delhi. So it's not that simple to pick it out. I mean, similarly with 7/7 in London, there were lots and lots of warnings that the guys who actually went into the tube and blew people up and killed themselves, and many others, they were identified as individuals long before it happened, and there were missed opportunities to stop them in their tracks. But they were among hundreds of individuals in the UK.
No, of course there were many missed warnings, but I think I asked the question more from the point of view of Headley's trial and how it's been observed
he's been
here.
let off. He's been let off, absolutely. Look at the sentence.
Exactly.
35 years. You know, I mean, if this had been a crime in America with 166 people dead due to his reconnaissance, he would be facing the death penalty. You know, we all know a deal was done. There's 80 hours. There's 80 hours of FBI interrogations of Headley, and the footage is remarkable. In that room, he is charming, he is affable, he is